Welcome to Complete Kids Online, friendly discussions about autism and other developmental disabilities. Learn how working together is working better, one conversation at a time.
Hello, welcome to Complete Kids Online. I'm Gina.
I'm Bob.
And we're joined with Steve. Steve is one of our BCBAs in our Belmont office. He's also a child famous actor, a home brewer, and more. So tell us a little more about that.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction. All accurate, yes. Board certified behavior analyst in our clinic here in Belmont. I do brew my own beer, and I've got one out now. It tastes just like a Guinness. It's fantastic for the holidays and the cold weather.
We didn't bring any.
I owe you two. And what was the other thing?
Child
famous. Yeah.
Famous being, subjective.
Right. I was famous for a brief 15 minutes, I think. And then I was a recovering...
Actually, 30 seconds. How long was the spot? 30 seconds?
It was about 30 seconds.
Yeah, 30 seconds.
15 minutes is being indulgent. And then I had to recover from child acting. And now I'm back doing podcasts and videos for Complete Kids.
Well, we appreciate
And
you
I'm
putting
very
yourself
happy
on
to
the
be
line
here.
again, Steve.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me. What's our topic for today?
So we were hoping to talk a little bit about the 4 functions of behavior.
Absolutely. So what I'd like to do in talking about this and tailoring it to our audience and to parents and families especially is to describe the 4 functions of behavior, what they are, give some examples, and then sort of pull from what parents bring to parent training and what they sort of ask about to kind of bring it to life. So if we just go through the list sort of quickly, in applied behavior analysis, there are only 4. One is attention. Kiddos and people do things for attention. And they exhibit and emit certain behaviors that get that attention. Some are more functional than others, right? So when we talk about the 4 functions of behavior, we're not only talking about what that behavior is and what it looks like, but also the reason that it happened in the first place and why it sticks around. Because really that's what parents want to know. It's one thing to sort of definitively say, aha, we know when this first happened or why your kiddo does it, but all of the interventions that behavior analysts design and implement, and sometimes if parents are competent enough to do so, follow through on at home or in a school, is based on that function of that behavior. So it's not guesswork, that's not allowed, and it's not effective, right? So when we think about attention, when we work with kids in the clinic, there's lots of different ways to get attention. One is to scream at the top of your lungs. And one is to tap you on the shoulder, right? I used to work with a kiddo that would stand on his father's coffee table. And that worked like a charm. I bet it did. He wouldn't even have to see him. He could feel it. He could just feel it as it's getting on the coffee table. And that elicits some response from the person that you want attention from. What we also talk with parents a lot about in terms of all of the functions of behavior, but particularly with attention, is that the kiddos on the spectrum, individuals with autism, they want your attention. Many do, some to a lesser degree than neurotypical individuals. But the way that they want your attention, the way that they escape situations or access tangible items like toys or one other function, is just the best that they can come up with at the time, right? Mm-hmm. And that's why parents are seeking treatment and coming to a place like Complete Kids and doing ABA and other types of therapy, is to condition their kiddos to give them repeated opportunities to come up and learn better ways, more adaptive, functional ways to get attention and do other things. So the way that applied behavior analysis sort of looks at behavior is that, sure, some behaviors are functional and some are not functional. It's not whether or not they're good or bad, or your personality necessarily or anything like that. It's when you perform certain behaviors, what are the consequences of that behavior? And if those consequences are reinforcing enough, then they do stick around, and they'll repeat themselves. It's one of the central tenets of applied behavior analysis. Not just that they repeat themselves like automatically, just that individuals will engage in more maladaptive attention-seeking behavior because it works. If it worked once and you got attention if you stood on the coffee table once and it worked, well, I don't know, maybe that's the way I do it now. Maybe that's the system, right? And so when we look at functions of behavior where it's sort of tied into what you're motivated by and what's reinforcing, and has it been reinforced or rewarded or praised in the past, or not?
So, what about the other way, Steve?
What
Otherwise, I want to break a habit. Like, I don't want them standing on the coffee table.
Yeah, so a lot of what we do in the clinic and work with parents with at home is to reinforce a more functional behavior, right? So if we take attention, for example, screaming is one way, but tapping you on the shoulder is a better way, right? It's more socially valid, it's generalizable, it makes life easier, right? So what we're trying to reinforce with parents is not to blame or judge or anything like that, but what they want to do at home is to model repetitiously and reinforce their kiddos for emitting these more functional behaviors, and then reinforce them immediately, even for trying, right? So, in the example of standing on a coffee table, right, we would teach many of the same adaptive responses. You could amplify your voice and say, "Daddy, Daddy," or some other vocal engagement of the other person, right? Now, there is this question about whether we should be prohibiting screaming and standing on coffee tables and that sort of thing. And I'm not going to say as a behavior analyst that there isn't a place for doing that. Most interventions focus on both, is to really increase the opportunity to engage in adaptive responses to get attention, and interventions that either ignore or put on extinction or removing items from the environment, so on and so forth, to simultaneously diminish chances or opportunities that kids would be standing on tables or screaming or things like that. So that's attention, right? Then there's escape, okay? So we have kids, parents come into parent training and they say, whenever I place a demand on my kiddo, they just run down the hall and slam the door. Or they throw themselves on the ground and flop, right? Or they turn away. Am I still in the video? And they turn away and they do this. I mean, it's kind of like if you cover your eyes, nobody's there, right? So that's the second one. It's a challenging behavior when it's maladaptive, but there's functional ways to escape situations. You can say, "I need a break." You can complete the work. That's a great way to escape. It's equivalent to my mom saying, the faster you do your homework, the sooner you're done, right? But we're trying to, at Complete Kids at our clinic, to create a really fulfilling, enriching, fun, cool environment with lots of things to work for, where kids will stick around at least long enough to engage in the things that are hard for them. But it's also, especially at a pediatric clinic when kids are 2 to 10 years old, and developmentally often times younger than that, than their chronological age, to expect them to stick around for things that are really difficult. And so it's not an all or nothing proposition, right? We know that kids are gonna escape the local environment. So we're asking parents to really think about why are kids running and escaping? And it's usually because demands are placed and they don't want to do that demand, and so they may not have the language to express that. So they just jet. And that's the best they can come up with at the time, and it's super effective, right?
So does that end? Is that right?
Can't do it if you're not there.
Yeah,
Right?
You can't,
So,
yeah.
so whatever you're trying
Right.
to get out of, you're out of.
Yeah, you can't do the work if you're not there, right? So one thing that we really work with the parents on is manipulating and changing the environment to create a really fun, rewarding scenario or setup, right? So we work more on the front end on antecedent designs and conditions than on the back end, I would say. I mean, sure, as an adult, there are many ways to keep kids where you want them, but that doesn't rely on their natural motivation to stay there, and that's what and their free will and their integrity and that sort of thing. So a lot of kids work with reinforcers on their table or eating food, and that transfers to the home, where we don't want to condition kids to become prompt dependent where they always have an iPad to eat. But for the purposes of learning skills like scooping food and putting it in your mouth, or sitting in a chair for a certain duration of time that's longer and longer, yeah, you've got to create an environment that they want to stay in. And oftentimes when kids escape, not all the time, but oftentimes, then they can be retrieved and encouraged to come back and sit down, or even work on things out in the open where they may have escaped, and put in that effort, right? So we don't use things like force or coercion or anything like that. It's really about relying on what kiddos are motivated by, and acknowledging that over time, as an environment becomes proportionally more enriching and you have more skills, then you're less likely to run down the hallway. Now, there are certain times when escape, we have to keep kids safe. I mean, you can't run out into the street and that sort of thing. But we're also working on goals related to escape that involve staying close, being reinforced for staying close to mommy or daddy, hand-holding, stopping, right? Especially when things are unsafe, where eventually those behaviors come under the control of your own person, right, where you can keep yourself safe. But otherwise, those are also a type of thing that we work on with parents in parent training related to the functions of behavior. I'll just say one thing very briefly about escape. Escape is not avoidance. So you think about traffic, right? So your GPS will tell you that you can completely avoid this aversive situation, one that you don't like traffic on 77 or 85 or whatever town you live in. And you've circumvented the whole thing. And life goes on, and everybody else sat in traffic. But once you're in it is more like escape. Once those demands are placed, then you try to figure out how to get out of it, right? The third one is access to tangibles. So parents will come to parent training and say, look, Johnny's gone into the fridge and is just taken out the milk. And my first instinct as a behavior analyst is to say, that's fantastic.
Mom's not so much.
Mom's not so amused, right? Or they've taken all the toys out of the bin, or I've hidden the iPad, or he's gone into my purse again. And I'm thinking, there's a lot of great skills there that we should, at least maybe in an internal monologue, congratulate and think is a good thing. Kids want stuff. People want stuff. So it's not so much about attention, although there is an attention component, and there's multiple functions of behavior and that sort of thing. If you want stuff, you usually have to get somebody's attention first to get that stuff. And in applied behavior analysis, and especially in the age and the population of kids that we work with, it's great to design programming and have parents follow through with kiddos getting your attention for that thing, right, through some method, and then have eye contact, and then place a demand, and then they get that thing, right? And whether that's by pointing or using a picture card or vocal speech, right, they can get that thing. And what's great is that when they get that thing, it's reinforcing because they got that thing. And then moms and dads, if they're doing a great job, will give tickles or a high five or whatever, right? So, you know, can you get something by going into mom's purse or in the fridge independently? Sure. It's really effective. But it's not as adaptive as we want that to be. So what parents can do at home are use the visual schedules and cues that we use in the clinic, right? So first you do work and then it's time to play. Play is you look at this picture and that's the cue that tangible items are available, right? I work with one family now where access to certain clothing items is done on a my day, mommy day, my day, mommy day. And they get to access those clothes, but it's not every day because you can't wear the shirt every day, the same shirt, right?
Says who, Steve?
What's that?
Says who?
You know, it counts as being clothed, but at the same time, you know, your friends might look at you funny at school, right? So the idea here is that it's not that they don't get tangible items, they do. It's how they get those items and being reinforced for both the method that they used, right, and getting that thing and getting things that are safe. And this applies at home to involve multiple people, right, like parents, okay, and grandma and grandpap and siblings and that sort of thing, right? We also work on, and parents can follow through on, you know, sharing and waiting. So it's not just getting that thing, but it's when you get that item and who provides the contingency or access to that thing, right? And so much of typical development involves just taking stuff, right? You just want stuff. You know, take that toy or take that train. But we're trying to work with parents on using the motivation and sort of the intrinsic or learned interest in things to then use a functional response to get those things. Now, along the same lines, parents often say that their kids don't play with enough different items, right? So we make lists, we do preference assessments, and we ask parents to do that at home, and a lot of them do, and they come up with like a short list. These are the items my kiddo is most likely to want to get their hands on. And that's when they can get their hands on things if they use functional communication or other methods, right? But they can also use those items that are tangible to work on other stuff, right? Like everybody has to get paid, and kids are no different, and older individuals are no different. What are you working for? Well, it's not for free. So parents have to take an active role and think, you know, they do have interests, but what are they? What are the things that they like to play with? And the other cool thing that we're doing in parent trainings as it relates to functions of behavior is trying to expand what kids are interested in or talk about, you know, so that they can expand what we call a repertoire or, you know, it's like, I give a lot of adult examples, but I only know like 2 dances to do at a wedding, okay? And that gets me through. But if it was like a dance contest, you know, I wouldn't win, okay? So yeah, it's trucks and it's Paw Patrol or it's Bubbles or whatever it is. But parents should feel free to introduce other things just to test and see if kiddos are interested in those things, and if they'll go after those things or produce responses that get those things. The other thing overarchingly that we're working on with like access to tangibles in the clinic is this really the pre-MEC principle. It's the system of first then. And kids, yes, they're working on these sort of granular ground game type of skills like pointing and echoics and responding to name and all that. But on a 50,000 foot overview, they're learning the contingencies by which you get attention, get to escape, and get your hands on stuff, right? And when you're young, or delayed or have autism, that may not be a system that you learn quickly. And really all parents are trying to do is to get through the day, and the solutions that they've come up with are the best that they've come up with at the time, right? So I'm hopeful that makes sense or can make sense to viewers or listeners of this, that it's not just functions of behavior and the list and all that. It's that individuals are learning and being conditioned to how they get those things, and to learn new ways of doing those things, and as hard as it is, leave the other ways behind. Now, the last function of behavior, which happens to be a real hot topic in parent trainings, are automatically reinforcing behaviors or intrinsically reinforcing behaviors. So these are behaviors that individuals do that if you left them in a room with a closed-circuit TV and nobody was there, they would engage in those behaviors. So some common ones that parents talk about are looking at lights or hand flapping, repetitive compulsive type behaviors, lining up, cars and things like that, and certainly there are others. But these are behaviors that they just feel really good. Now, they might not feel really good to you or to me, but they feel really good to the individual. Now, my wife reads while listening to music, which I cannot fathom. But for some reason, whatever those inputs are, whatever the sensory experience is that she has, she reads better. Now, you put me in that situation, that's like, I would read worse, right? So the function of that behavior is that it's reinforced by engaging in it in the absence of any sort of social mediation, right? To be a little bit more researchy, to stick to our roots in applied behavior analysis of being evidence-based. So parents are incredibly frustrated by these behaviors. There are many different approaches and strategies. I think one that I've used and have counseled parents on is to say that hallmark features of autism involve repetitive compulsive behaviors. It's really not about, well, let's get rid of that totally first and then work on all this other stuff. It's sort of to accept that kiddos or individuals will engage in one or more of those behaviors, and then to weigh from an ethical perspective and from a skill acquisition perspective what focus we want to, how much focus we want to pay to that during treatment. But certainly the focus is to reduce or eliminate behaviors that interfere with learning, right? So lining up cars, a lot of it involves just modeling, more functional ways to play with cars. And to accept the fact that working and doing things that are difficult to acquire skills may not involve those intrinsically automatically reinforcing behaviors, but that you can do that at another time, right? There's lots of kids that need a lot of physical inputs, like squeezes and doing your hands up and down, or we have kids in the clinic that they work great bouncing on a ball. And so there's no need to do anything about that. And that translates and transfers to a home environment where parents should feel free, and we encourage them to provide inputs for their kiddos, as long as it's safe and healthy and doesn't interfere with learning, to facilitate exactly that. I will mention that I went to ABAI International in Dublin, and I attended a talk there about the ethics.
ABAI is
the Applied Behavior Analysis International.
And that
right?
is the international organization.
Yes,
for ABA.
for ABA, yeah. And there's a conference, and it was.
I'm just cluing in now.
Yes, sorry about that. Intuitive to me, but maybe not to the audience. And there was one talk, symposium, from a researcher that was really talking about the ethics of automatically reinforcing behavior, like self-injurious behavior that feels good but is also really concerning and could be dangerous and unsafe. And also, vocal stereotypy, like just repeating the same thing over and over and over again, or doing the same thing, motor stereotypy, doing the same thing over and over and over again. And the net, without getting into the research itself, was that, in ABA we're really guided by research and by evidence-based practice. And there may be a need to address some types of automatically reinforcing behavior immediately, and definitely those that are unsafe to an individual self or other people is on the top of the list, specifically self-injurious behavior. But others, you may focus on, but less. And so what we talk with parents about is, weighing those, right, and acting immediately to address those concerns. Or sort of characterizing or categorizing automatically reinforcing behavior as something that we wish to address by reducing or eliminating, but doesn't fall into one of these other two categories, right? They happen to be the most difficult to reduce, right? One of the things that we work on, not to belabor the point, with parents is, generally in applied behavior analysis, and in terms of the functions of behaviors, what sticks around is what gets reinforced. Even if you've ignored it and ignored it and ignored it, if you look over at your kiddo, even that once, it can start to live again, okay? But in the case of automatically reinforced behaviors, that's not really the case. Is that parents need to understand that kiddos do and individuals do these behaviors just because they feel good. So we try to figure out ways that they can get those inputs, but also work on the things that are difficult and model more functional ways to play, where that might not be like what feels good, but it certainly makes life easier and to expand your play repertoire or to make friends and things like that. Makes sense?
Yeah.
Hopefully it makes sense.
So, you brushed on quickly about the parent training and,
Yeah.
and obviously the four
Functions of behavior.
that
You got
have
it.
brain cramp play a big part in that. So, a couple questions is, what should a parent come, I'll do them one at a time. What should
Sure.
a parent come prepared for a parent training session?
Should they come prepared?
No, what do I need to do?
So the most important thing is to just come with your story and your experience of being a parent. Really and truly.
Mm-hmm. And that's it.
Well, that's not just it.
Oh, okay.
That's part of the equation, right? A parent training is, I think parents should have a willingness and openness to talk about autism, to learn about autism and learn about functions of behavior and any number of other topics, to bring to parent training what is important to them, and to ask the behavior analyst that's conducting the session and collaborating and working with their family to focus on what's important to them. And certainly there has to be, an educational component, and it has to be justifiable to the insurance company. But to bring those topics to parent training, a lot of parents find that easy. They say, no, it's what do I do about this behavior? And I've tried that, but that didn't work. And I think we're on the cusp of potty training. And so how can you help me with that? There are topics that we should be covering off on, but not to the exclusion of customizing these sessions to parents. The other thing is, to the extent that parents are able to follow through with interventions at home, they should do that and try. whether it's visual schedules or
So
just
some homework,
yeah,
if you will.
yeah, homework. The parents that I work with, it's a mix. Everybody needs something different. Some parents they want a printout, or they want to read a research article, and other parents really just need to try something for 1 or 2 days or a week, and then have the behavior analyst check back in and see how that's going. I think those are two or three really important components. Is parents know their kids best. And at Complete Kids, sure, they're dropping off their kids and they're doing a certain duration of therapy in a day, but the willingness to participate and to try new things and to...
That was my follow-up question.
Yeah.
So, and I'm sure, I don't know the data on it, Steve.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have parents that are willing to participate and some parents maybe not so much, for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So I'm a parent, and I'm like, I'm coming here for the kid. I don't need to do any parent training. Tell me why that's a bad attitude.
Yeah. So, I don't necessarily think of things in good or bad, right? And I know you didn't mean it that way,
Yeah.
but, and I don't have the data right in front of me. So just to be full disclosure, kids get better outcomes when parents participate.
Well, that's basically what I was getting.
That's
I mean, we don't need a
yeah,
research study.
in the context of a podcast, that's the bottom line.
Right.
And the reason is because kids spend the majority of their time at home with their primary caregivers. Now, parents are not therapists. That's not the purpose of parent training, right? And that's why I'm saying to the extent to which parents can do it. But parents are not speech pathologists or OTs or PTs either. And so, but yes, as long as those interventions are being done appropriately, then yes, more tends to be better. The other reason that it works better is because parents learn over time that they are and have to be a fierce advocate for their child. And that's a learned skill and something that some parents, upon a diagnosis, were never anticipating. I mean, always to be an advocate for your kid, but not in the way that children with disabilities or with autism need. Now, tomorrow, in the school system, when they're 18, for the rest of their life. And so it's not just functions of behavior and other more like esoteric topics or potty training. There's a lot of work done on advocacy and parent empowerment so that they can feel a little bit more control over the situation, but also to plan for the next phase that's going to happen with their kiddo or a new team, because you really always have a team. It just changes. And so for those reasons, outcomes are better for kids. This is not a magic trick. And neither is any therapeutic service or service modality either. I always joke with parents that Belmont has a, what's the $10 gym? Planet Fitness? Yeah. I don't know if I want to say Planet Fitness on the podcast.
That's okay.
Going to the gym is not the same thing as working out.
Right.
And you can send your kid to an ABA clinic, and they'll do a lot of work with us. But that's not really the same thing as being fully invested. And we know that that's hard, and we know that that takes time. But the outcomes are better for kids on the more technical stuff and on the advocacy part as well.
I remember a while ago, these guys, the Freakonomics?
Yeah.
They were all stats guys.
Yeah.
And they did a study on parents that were having kids that would read these books. What's the famous one? Dr. Spock, like not.
Oh,
Star
yeah.
Trek guy,
Yeah.
And these kind of books, and would that help them become better parents? Well, what they found out is no, it actually wouldn't. However, the parents that were interested enough to figure out and seek out those books were better parents.
Yeah.
So it really wasn't what they learned in the books, it was the attitude.
Yeah.
And I assume it's the same type of thing. It's not so much, I'm sure you'll learn a lot from parent training, but it's also just the attitude of, I'm investing
Yes.
in my kid.
Yes. And I'll say this as well. One of the criteria for attending parent trainings or trying new strategies or tactics isn't necessarily a full acceptance of the diagnosis. We know that is incredibly difficult, and that's a process. And we know how hard it is. I praise every parent that comes for coming, just for getting there, because they have like a crazy life and a hectic life and other challenges, you know. But yes, just the motivation to be there and to be open to learning and to sharing, you know, because it is a team, and we want to know what's important to parents and work on the things we need to work on and that we're obligated to work on, but also hot button issues at home, so that, and those are ones that parents are candidly more likely to work on, you know, are the things that potentially solutions for make life easier at home.
Everybody's got to get paid.
Everybody's good. You know, that's, so, you know, I'll just, you know, along these lines of functions of behavior. We also encourage parents to really think about what is great and positive about the behaviors that their kids are doing, right? And then to think about where they need to go from there. You know, making sounds is awesome,
Right.
but making speech sounds is better and more specific and 1 word to 2 words and all that. Running is great. Maybe not down the hall when mom asks you to sit at the dinner table, right? So, and you know, there are some parents that I work with that have really settled in that this is a really important role that they play in treatment delivery and in their kids' life. The goal is not to, you know, I'm not a college professor. We don't have tests in parent training. So it doesn't matter that you get all of this information perfectly all at once. What really matters is that over time, you learn about the functions of behavior more and more, and you start to think, oh, that's attention. And this is what Mr. Steve said that we were going to do about that to increase an adaptive response of the frequency of it, or tweak or shape or reduce the maladaptive
So
response.
is that step 1, Steve? Like you had said, talking about the 4 functions, is identifying which function we're...
Yeah, well, I mean, after a short presentation, you know, I mean, I present slides and, you know, evidence-based information. And then, you know, an ask would be, at home, not all day long, but just for like a brief period of time. Or when there's a really punctuated event. Just think about, what's the function of that behavior? Why is Johnny or Janie doing that? They're not just doing that. And we're not asking parents to like develop complex theories about behavior or whatever, or test them or anything like that. But it's really helpful just to sort of get it in the right bucket. Because if you get it in the right bucket, then the intervention that follows is based on that function. And that's really the link, is if parents are going to follow through at home, you got to identify the function, right? So, okay, he's standing on the coffee table to get my attention. It's not to escape. He doesn't want the coffee table. He wants my attention. So if you can get that right, you know, more often than not, then what you do about that, as guided by the behavior analyst in the treatment plan and research, would be an intervention or a response from a parent that's likely to really work and reduce standing on coffee table behavior. Now, in a perfect world, this kiddo wouldn't stand on your coffee table. He'd just come up and tap you on the shoulder and say, "Daddy, Daddy, I need my lunch," right? But for kids on the spectrum, you know, that might be a challenge. Or maybe it's just not today. But further down the line, you would learn both a functional adaptive response that gets reinforced like awesome. Like you throw a ticker tape parade down Main Street if they use a word instead of standing on the coffee table. And also some changes to the environment, like maybe we work in a room where there isn't a coffee table, right? Or maybe we look at visuals for coffee table time, not coffee table time, or any other potential solutions. And these are things that parents can do at home, right? And Bob, my wife says I over-explain everything, so here I go.
Are you going to mansplain me?
I'm going to mansplain you on functions of behavior. One of the other things we're kind of empowering parents to do, at least at Complete Kids, and hopefully this is true in our entire field, is to let parents know that they can do something. They can participate, they can act. Now, they shouldn't be doing things that they're not trained to do, and we all know that, and they don't want to do those things. They trust us with those procedures. But they can do things. And
that's got to be somewhat empowering, right? I would think.
Oh my gosh. So when parents try that, and there is a word to get attention, or they call a kid's name and they actually turn around, it's like the most beautiful thing. It's we have parents that come in and say, that's all I want. Okay.
Right.
I don't care what you want.
Right.
I want my kid to answer to his name, or to say their first word, or whatever it is. And they can take steps to help their kid at home. At some clinics, they're in our field, there's hybrid programs where they come to the clinic and then there's some opportunity to go in the home. I used to work home-based, so I was in the home-based before the clinic setting. And in many ways similar, but also in many ways different, because you're in somebody's home, and the parents are right there all the time, and they'll participate. But either way, trying something and seeing it work is better than any story I can tell you about functions of behavior. I mean, you have to sort of learn the basics and a little bit of foundational knowledge. And we don't want to water that down either for everybody listening here at home and around the world to this podcast. In the universe. Is that we have to make this information in parent trainings that is technical accessible to parents, but not watered down, that it sort of doesn't abide by our ethical and evidence-based standards in our field. Some parents like more or less of that. I have parents that come in and say, show me all the graphs. And I love that because I love graphs. And other parents, there's other ways to get to the same message, right? So, and just because we try things doesn't mean that we won't try them again, or that we have to tweak one little part of it. But that's not really, in the end, the parent's job is to really overthink why that didn't work, or it worked but then it stopped working. That's the behavior analyst's job to do that in concert with research and your supervisor or other people that have more experience. I mean, these things I've not experienced with at all, and I consult on those issues. So that's the other thing, is that whatever is going to be done in parent training and what we ask of parents to do may take some thoughtful consideration. And that can be frustrating in the parent training session, whether it's functions of behavior. So, well, you don't know the function of behavior? And I'd say, today I don't. I'm going to have to do some more work or develop a better theory. Or I know that I theorize that it's one, but it might also be something else, I mean, if all of this were easy, then, well, it would just be easy.
Anybody could do it.
Anybody could do it, right? So I don't know how long I've podcasted for at the moment.
I think we're on third day, right?
Third day. People have turn it off. You can edit this any way you want. But attention, escape, access to tangible things like toys or food, and those automatically reinforcing behaviors that every parent sort of just knows that they've seen their kiddo do. The net takeaway is that our view is that there's only 4, and that if you can really understand the function of the purpose that behavior serves and why it sticks around, You can either design interventions, whether it's in the clinic or at home, to get a lot more of that or way less of that.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, maybe both, right? So that's what I've got on functions of behavior. And as it relates to parent training.
I feel almost like an expert right now on
Right.
functions of behavior after this.
Almost.
podcast.
Almost.
No, seriously, Steve, we really appreciate your time.
Yeah.
You really, even for me, a guy that's been around it for a while, opened my eyes to stuff I wasn't aware of.
Yeah, we're really excited about talking about these topics, educating parents, challenging them in a way where we meet them where they are to follow through with using these concepts with their kids at home and in other environments, and doing that often. Many of the insurance companies in treatment plans, it's stipulated that they'll do so twice a month. There's a set number of units available. There's different scenarios, but the parents have these sessions available to them. Usually 2, sometimes more. And that it's a disclosed goal in the treatment plan. Mm-hmm. For Bob, what you were saying is that there's research that totally suggests that outcomes are better for parents that participate, and you're not going to get away with having a treatment plan that doesn't have this component in it, And you say, well, what would I talk about for 6 months? Twice, that's 24 times I got to come and talk to Mr. Steve. Well, believe me, if today was any indication, I got a lot of stuff to talk about.
24 might not be enough.
But it's not enough. It's not enough. We need more sessions. But yeah, I mean, so this is hopefully some insight into the functions of behavior and how it kind of translates to what parents talk about in parent training that's related to behaviors that serve some purpose, some function, and why they might be sticking around.
That was great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You want to ask him the standard exit question?
So you know how we have our superhero theme?
I do,
Each of
yeah.
our therapists are their own superhero.
Yeah.
So if you had a superpower, what would it be?
So, I've thought about this.
Oh, I bet you have.
Yes. And my power is that I can play outside while it's raining without getting wet.
That's a pretty good one.
It's real specific,
Yes.
but I like it.
Very specific.
So I can play outside
I never get wet.
all the time.
You could get one of those little umbrella hats.
That's not super. This is without the aid.
And the one thing you definitely do not look like with one of those is a superhero.
So if it's raining in Belmont and you see me outside, and I'm not the least bit concerned about it, or wet,
We know you got your superpower.
turn on. Thanks so much for inviting me on.
Yeah,
No,
thank
thanks
you
for-
so much
thanks
for
for
being
coming,
here. And if you have any topics that you'd like addressed or any questions, just leave them below in the comments or send us a message and we'll get to you. So see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
To continue the conversation, visit the links to our website, Facebook page, or Instagram in the comments.